Games are changing, and so are the career paths as well. So let's talk about what may be the best one for you. Hey everyone, I hope you're well, playing on and making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, lead level designer Max Pears. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you're having a great time, whether it be morning, evening, or night. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to the show. For those of you who may be watching, I definitely look to be in more of a stealth mode for it, with everything dressed in black for it. You'd be thinking I'm trying to sneak in and out of places with how I'm looking right now. But really, let's not focus on my fashion sense, because that's not why you're here. And for the incredible listeners of a podcast, you really don't care. Now, the big thing to really talk about with this, or should I say starters on this, is the title change for myself. I am now a lead level designer over at People Can Fly, and I have been for about just over a month by the time this podcast comes out. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it, but I kind of wanted to share a few things about how the industry has changed since obviously I joined well over a decade ago, which again makes me feel so young, so spry for it. But there is a lot in that, and I kind of want to talk more about with many of you going through their careers, maybe just starting, or maybe a few years in and trying to figure more out. So I just want to go through a few things that I've learned and discuss different elements of, well, what is the best per se? Instead of a traditional sponsor, what I'm offering now is that of joining the mailing list. Social media is constantly changing all the time, as we're seeing some people are leaving Twitter, others are choosing to remain, Blue Sky, Threads, all of this. So it's really hard to reach out to all of you incredible aspiring and current game devs. So what I'm offering here is that of a emailing list. So if you want to be kept up to date with all of the great level design news, as well as get your free guide, which is my 10 tips towards better level design, then please join the mailing list. You'll be making sure to get 3 emails a week with me sharing that of different resources, ideas, as well as what I've learned through my career and some Q&As. So if you're constantly looking to improve level design and instead trying to figure out where all this information may be, then look no further than the mailing list. Check down in the description below to join now and get that of your 10 tips to improve your level design. Right, what is it that you may want to know more about, maybe you have misconceived notions about, and kind of show different elements for it? I think the first one is to talk about the big changes in the industry that I've seen for it. Now, the first one has to be development time, right? When I started, you'd roughly take 2 to 3 years to ship a AAA roughly game for it, right? And in that time, that has only advanced, right? My time on Cyberpunk was just shy of 5 years for it. Again, that's just my time, right? There's others who've been in that project longer for it. Same with Division. Division for me was 2 years. DLC was 6 months. Obviously, Phantom Liberty, that was 3 years, but I only worked on that one for a year. And we've obviously seen how this is probably going to change soon now because of all the recent layoffs, sadly, and the amount of money it costs to make a game now, right? To the fact that it is something which has had a huge impact also on careers as well, right? Now, when I was looking at jobs, and you'll see different job specifications where you're looking at, and also on different ones with documentaries, one of the big ones I saw or was seeing is that, like, say for example you're applying for a senior or a lead, you had to have X amount, or they would prefer if you had X amount of games released. Now obviously that's less and less possible in a time frame. As senior, it used to be about five years minimum when people start looking at you in that position, right? So it's a little bit different when a game can just take 5 years, where I say, for example, senior 5 years, minimum 2 games, right? That's how it used to be described. I think I even saw on the Last of Us 2 documentary, one of their lead designers, he'd only worked on Last of Us 2, right? And I think he started his QA from there, so an incredible rise up for it. But again, just showing how much has changed. Because from my experience in Ubisoft, now Ubisoft is obviously different to Naughty Dog. But I'd released 7 mobile games, but they wouldn't make me intermediate until I released Division, right? Because of the fact that they still thought something was to prove by the fact, and I still think there is validity in the statement. Your understanding of how a game goes all the way through a process, right? Like, it is a challenge from starting from pre-production, the change and shift to production, then the mind shift to closing a project out, right? But again, it is something that I think is valid, but also I'm now on the understanding of, well, how can we provide that if you've only been able to work on one game that takes you 5+ years, right? And I'm sure other games probably take longer as well. And from this now, we've also seen other kind of reactions from that. We've sadly seen it where there's a lot of people I know in the industry, incredible designers, but sadly have either never released a game or only released one game because of the industry, right? Completely out of their control. And it's not just designers, it's other disciplines as well. And that's a really tough one for it, because how do you, if you wanted to move, it's a much harder ask, because you've got nothing to show from it. I consider myself very lucky. There are a lot of games that I've worked on that never got shipped, but there's a lot of games that I've worked on that have been shipped and released. But it's not the easiest for it, and it's so much out of your control when you are just whatever discipline you are that goes into that, right? And funding obviously right now has become even harder for us to obtain. So again, these are some other changes that we're now seeing, and I don't know if I'd be curious if people who are listening who are in that position, who haven't been able to release a game, if they feel that's hindered them from being able to move, for example. I think part of that can lead to different things, right? You can see people feeling the loyalty a bit more, because in the sense of, just say for example, despite the game's not coming out, they still have a job, right? And as we've seen, like 26% of the European game market has been laid off from 2022 to 2024. So it's a very different space. And another aspect that I've seen now is different roles for it as well. I have seen combat designer become a newish one, narrative designer for it, quest designer, experience design. I mean, that one's kind of the same as a quest. But like quest designer, when I first worked at Ubisoft, it was kind of that you had the mission. We had 2 LD teams split from like your mission and your open world. Your mission designer had more control and input and narrative. But the element of quest design is now becoming far more of a common thing. Same with narrative, right? Because some people, there is confusion between like a narrative designer would be that of a writer, when really it's actually a narrative design from my experiences. And sometimes it's also called a quest designer, is you take the element from the writers and actually implement it and see how it's delivered in games, right? Combat design is very, very different as well. I've seen that one kind of come through. We didn't have it for most of Cyberpunk, then it came in partway through. I've seen it in Sony Santa Monica as well. There's a lot of overlap in terms of with different disciplines from that as well. So it's quite a fascinating one to see that there's even more specialities for it. Really, even level design is derived from that of game design, right? And we're seeing a lot more of that kind of show through. And then the second thing for it, now we're seeing more different roles like separating towards principal. Principal didn't exist when I got into the industry, I'd say it's roughly only been the last 5 years. I know Ubisoft had something like Expert, but you had to have like over 20 years before that like really even came into effect. And I think it's great, right? I think principle is a great thing to have, because we're talking about how the game industry has changed, showing different roles, sadly people not being able to finish certain things and people giving up more of their lives on projects. But I think principle is a great one for those, and we'll talk about now, who don't want to specialize into being a lead. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think a lot of people, myself included, got into this industry being like, oh yeah, lead, when the reality of what being a lead is, for the most part, now some places may vary, is that you are management in terms of, that doesn't necessarily mean power, it means you organizing your team, right? Organizing on what they deliver it, best pipelines to deliver it, as well as helping career growth for it, making sure that they feel that they can grow and listen to them on that front. And also that of production aspects, like how long is this going to take, elements on that. And these are huge for it, and it is very different because you start to, for the most part, lose chances to being the editor. Now, some places it's different depending how big your team is, but I say anything over 5 people you have to manage, I don't think you're possible in doing work and management for it. It's, again, different places may have different opinions for it, but I'm just telling you from what I've seen. Well, as principal still allows you to be on the same level as a lead, and then you can possibly, and I've seen a few principals go into director positions from that, and that's a big thing with it, right? But it still allows you to actually go off and still create, right? I think so many people are in a rush to, and I get it from a pay point of view, because I've been the same, are in a rush to go off and get to lead, not realizing, well, actually, you're going to lose the opportunity to make stuff, which is kind of why we all get into games to begin with, right? And there was a great interview with the head of Saber, and they were talking about that. He started on in the original Doom, and he's now overall kind of, I can't remember his title, but it's something like head reviewing like all game projects under the Saber banner, which has most recently been for this year, that of Warhammer Space Marine 2, right? And he mentioned that like once the toothpaste is out, you can't put it back in the bottle, right? Meaning that once you get into management, you can't go and jump into the editor. Like one of the things that a head producer told me that he saw with directors he'd worked with is sometimes they're like focusing on the nitpicky of details instead of directing and giving bolder direction. And that's one of the harder things, I think, is switching your mind from, whether that be lead to the director level, is that even though you're giving direction, you're telling them this is what makes, or you're giving the guidance to what makes a great level for your game here, or for what we need for a certain aspect of like a traversal space, right? You're giving them guidance to follow, these 3 principles, but how they deliver it, as long as it checks those principles for the most part, it's out of your control. And I think there's something to keep that in mind for, right? Like the validation, the excitement should come from being able to help your team grow and allow them to deliver in certain ways, because again, you don't want to micromanage people. And I think there's always struggles in people to want to do that, because just do this, it'll be quicker. But really, you have to let people figure that out on their own, and also be able to accept that they might have a way better idea than you for it. Now, a principle, in terms of the difference, is a principle will actually make those elements. Say the lead will say, hey, we need to deliver, what I want is, as we talked about, three guiding principles. It's on the principle, 3 guiding, deliverables to make a certain traversal space. If we're sticking on that, example for it, the principal will then go make a few different versions of it, right? what do you think about this? Blah, 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 blah. And they'll have the actual technical knowledge in the editor to be able to then go off, teach other members, but also give you the lead. Okay, this actually is more challenging, but I recommend trying this because it's quicker. Or, hey, the systems aren't set up correctly. This is what we need from the team to make sure we can deliver. They tell the lead will then go communicate with other teams and make sure this gets changed, or if it can't be changed, speak to the principal. How do we best deliver this then for it, right? And I think that is something that is a big difference. Now, I've heard people, and myself when I was younger as well, think that lead means, oh, you get the final say in everything, you have all this authority. You don't. Like, you definitely have a bigger role in guidance for it, but you're still answering to you. And again, this depends different studios. You may have a level design director, you may have a game director, you then have creative director, right? You can still suggest things to help them reach what they're after in terms of. I've had some creative directors who've come from an art background, some creative directors come from production. In the previous episode, we talked about how one has come from community management. You never know, some have come from animation. Design doesn't always mean creative director. That's the end goal. There are other paths that lead to that for it, right? But regardless if you came from design, there's always going to be a weakness, shall we say, of which is why you have a team, of your abilities to then help and share that. But regardless, as a lead, you still have someone to answer to for it. And your role is not just making sure level design is the best it can be, but it's also facilitating the team, right? Making it clear that, hey, you have all the tools that you need to go off and make the best levels. And if you don't, well, then the lead needs to help solve that with production or with another team. And I think that's another aspect is, I don't want to use the word political, but like, it is that kind of balancing act, right? Where everyone in every discipline is really trying to go through and deliver the best they can, right? And sometimes that comes at a cost of other disciplines. So you need to figure out, okay, well, do we need to fight every battle where level design needs to be on top, for example? The answer is you don't. And the answer is it's okay sometimes for level design to take a back seat for certain aspects of a game. Now, obviously, when you're when you're designing stuff, you're also shielded from certain information going around at the time, right? And your lead has to be aware of different information and try make certain decisions, which again, you may not always agree with, but what they believe is the best for the overall project, team, time, whatever it is. Because remember, as a lead, you're serving, and I think this is one of the biggest things that I would say is, you are serving your team. You are not necessarily in control of them. You're trying to make it clear, yes, you make decisions for them, but also you're making sure that you can give them the freedom, the tools, the motivation, the inspiration to do the best they can with their job. You're also in service of your directors. And then finally, you're in service of the players. There's probably even more of that. Money doesn't come from the directors, it comes from publishers, so that's another thing for it. But as a lead, you're probably not dealing with publishers. Some places you might, but for the most part, I don't think you will. That's more director job. So there's a lot of people that you're trying to spin plates with and balance out. But as a lead, it is your team and players that are generally the biggest priority, in my opinion. Well, as principal, it's being able to show the examples of the best work possible is coming from you. You're maybe not necessarily the fastest, but I think it is an aspect. And that you're able to not only just block out stuff, but you're helping to direct things like on aspects of a certain game. I created what I believe to be, with the help of lead and another principal and senior, what the best principles for stealth were so others could use moving forward. And I believe that was my job as a principal. It's not just, I noticed that we're all making stealth but slightly differently. And for the game, what does that mean? What does stealth mean? So it was on me to figure that out and to then deliver it in a hopefully an easier way for people to comprehend versus just feel that they're left in the dark for it. And that's on you as a principal, not even to be told that, but to think about that moving forward. Now, as I said, I have seen principals move to directors, but definitely less from it. Again, partly is principal is a new aspect, and I think the other thing is some principals don't even want to get into directing. They just want to make games forever, which is not a bad thing at all. And I think people sometimes feel that it is a bad thing, and I guess what I'm trying to share with this episode is leadership might not be for you, and that's perfectly fine, because just because you're an incredible level designer, it doesn't mean you're going to be a good lead, or vice versa, where I've seen it where some of the great leads are not the best level designers for it in certain aspects. And I think that's one that you have to think about and understand, because although you may think, oh yeah, I get the final say and blah blah blah, it's not necessarily true, team. Really, you are having some control, more control than others, but I think you're losing a chance to still create, and that is something you have to think about for it. I was offered lead positions. It was at Sony London, sadly the studio that has been shut down. I think it was back in 2020 for it, and there was other ones as well. Now, it didn't come to be just because of other aspects, and there were some moments and times where I was like, oh, did I make the right mistake? The right choice. Was it a mistake not to take it earlier? And obviously, as many of you know, I went to contracted at, I think, 12 studios in 4 years. And it's given me a great chance to work and constantly create different levels, different games. And I really appreciate that, because again, now I'm into lead, me creating is going to be less and less. So I appreciate the 12 years I've had of actually just making stuff. So I'd say some people are always rushing, and I've seen people rush there as well. I'd say take your time. And I say that, and I know I say it can kind of sometimes be a bit condescending, because, oh, well, Max, you're already there. I get it. But it wasn't just me. There was he's now level design director, I think, Barnaby Zola, who was one of my mentors back at Ubisoft, and he could tell I was like chomping at the bit to improve. And he's just told me, just relax. You know, like if you get there, you'll lose your chance to create. And he took a long time to convince to be lead, because he didn't want to give up that aspect for it. And that's why I say it's the same to all of you, is there's no rush. Enjoy creating for all you can, because it's a great thing, and you can actually point out, hey, this is what I did. I mean, when the games come out that I've led, I'm unsure what I'm going to be able to put on the portfolio, because it's the incredible team that I have, and I'm very fortunate with the team that I have coming into a leadership. They're very smart, motivated individuals, and I'm very fortunate to be able to lead them, not them to have me, for me to have them. I'm the fortunate one. And you know, I can't talk much about work, so we'll kind of leave it on that one, but it is something that I think just respect for it, you know, like really don't rush there. And that's another thing that I think I've seen, is the quality of seniors has maybe dropped, in my opinion. And that can be twofold, right? It could be onefold where, like, you know, people can say whatever they want about Ubisoft, and I get what a lot of things should be said about it. But when I was there, and again, people have called it like the golden age of Ubisoft. I don't necessarily know if it was, but I joined 2014, I believe it was, up to end of 2016, so 2.5 years. The seniors we had were incredible, like genuinely amazing. I can say when I was a senior, I was unsure if I remotely hit the level that they all did for it. And I'm seeing a lot more people get senior quicker, whether that's just because career hopping and there's, again, I respect it. Money, sadly, is tied to your titles, which at the end of the day, we all need to live. Cost of living crisis is really bad. Or it could be that, hey, I'm more experienced now, so it's not as much of an ooh and ah as it was when I was younger and less experienced. But I think it is something to consider for it. And maybe it's also because the fact games take longer to make, so they don't see all the development for it. And that could be another thing. I don't know. There's not a right or wrong answer, and again, that's not me trying to insult anyone for it. It's that it could be my own preconceived notions, and it's something that I'm trying to get to grips with, where I've seen people, like I said, multiple people with over 5 years never release a title, and I cannot imagine how annoying, how frustrating and demotivating that must be. I'm very fortunate in my career that, as I said, most of the stuff I've worked on has released for it. You know, it's over 10 projects that I've worked on have released, you know. So, and again, when I started, it was mobile. You know, there were times where we only had weeks to months to get it done, right? So that very different. And mobile development has changed completely from, again, when I was starting back in 2012. So yeah, it's a very different one. But yeah, I think it's the one that I just want to kind of raise up. Then again, there are more roles out there. Technical level design is something that's more and more focused on nowadays, technical designers. And I think it's just one worth just pointing out that really take time, especially when either you're just getting in, just starting. Don't rush it. Really understand each of these roles for it. Again, I get that you want to be intermediate, senior, whatever it is, quicker, because the pay is better, for example. But also don't be afraid or feel that you're trying to rush things when there's so much to learn. Like I say this from my position, even as a lead right now, and again, I feel very fortunate in the position that I am in. Man, there's still so much for me. I'm not even talking about just leadership. Like, still so much in level design. I'm like, fuck, so many people. You know, I guess we've had on this show previously, other people that I've spoken to. You know, it's amazing. Truly incredible people out there that I'm just in awe of every day. So, yeah, what I'm really trying to say is there's different routes for you. Don't feel that you have to jump to lead just for the sake of jumping to lead. Principal's an incredible role, and I've met some, again, people that either just come into principal, have been principal, or on the cusp of being principal. They're amazing, man, like truly amazing. And I think for me, being principal to go to lead, it really taught me a lot before it. You know, I wasn't doing leadership. Luckily, Adam, my leader at Hangar, allowed me to bring different ideas towards that of what I felt was missing in the team and things that I can do to help improve team camaraderie, design experience and stuff. And he gave me that platform to do that, and I believe it did help. There's some things that definitely fell flat on the face, but he still allowed me to experiment, and that gave me a chance. So having a support like that has been brilliant. There's other incredible leads that I've had throughout my career as well. Maybe we'll go through that one day if people are interested. But I just want to share that there is so many different routes for it. In my career, I've been technical level designer, experience designer, obviously level designer, mission designer, and general developer, which was mobile back in the day. You know, so there's a lot there for it, and sometimes that's great because it allowed me to learn different aspects and respect different places, because I didn't know much about, like, experience design. I was doing more mechanics than I was level design, and it allowed me to put my money where my mouth was, because the fact that I'd felt some of the previous projects I worked on, the design, not through the fault of the team, because no one is trying to make a bad game, whatever it was, was one of the weaker elements, but it allowed me to think about how to make mechanics, all the way through pacing of a game, and it was great. Those mechanics weren't used, but there's still stuff that I learned from it, and again, have utmost respect. So always remember, no one is trying to make a bad game, and just have some time to think for yourself, what is a good career for you? So I hope this helps you. Do you have any questions about it? Leave it either down below. You can get in contact with me via email, which is leveldesignlobby@gmail.com, or you can message me on Twitter, which is @MaxPairs. I now have Blue Sky. See how old I sound? But if you want to, you can get in touch with me there again, @MaxPairs, for it as well. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to hear your thoughts. I really hope this has opened your mind a bit, allowed you to think of different routes, not necessarily just going through what people tell you is the traditional routes, the best route, blah, blah. There's only one way. There's multiple different ways. Some incredible devs that have started through QA that I've known who haven't, who were previously artists that joined over, others that have no art ability at all. There's so many incredible ways through this beautiful and fantastic industry that we have. So yeah, take care all. Thank you very much. As I said, I hope that it has been helpful, and I'll catch you all next time.